The story began when Shin Sang-hyun, aged 55, slumped to the ground, his face weary and etched with exhaustion. He muttered to himself, his voice tinged with self-mockery, questioning what he was even doing at his age. While others his age were contemplating retirement, his life felt like nothing but a failure. At that very moment, outside the cave where he sat, 3 wyverns prowled closer, their ferocious eyes locking onto him. Their fangs bared and claws ready, they charged forward with deadly intent. Shin let out a weary sigh, forcing himself to his feet while gripping his sword tightly. A faint, bitter smile tugged at his lips as he muttered, "Damn it! Can't you even give me a moment to breathe?" Before he could react further, the wyverns dove straight into the cave. Their massive jaws tore through the narrow space, reducing it to rubble in an instant. Yet Shin wasn't afraid of them. In fact, he wasn't afraid of anything. Gathering strength in his legs, he surged forward like an arrow, heading straight for the monsters. Even as he prepared to face these deadly creatures, his mind drifted to his past. He reflected on his failures, wondering why he had fallen so far behind. The players of his generation had become legends, sword saints, sword gods, while he had become nothing more than an old man swinging a sword. At best, he was a forgetful swordsman, a title that offered little recognition. He thought to himself, "Isn't that reason enough? I had no family. I grew up in an orphanage. But even the caretaker and the other kids people I considered family were wiped out when Skyfall happened." Skyfall had been a cataclysmic event. The sky itself had split open, and monsters rained down like a storm, taking everything from him. Yet Shin had not despaired. At the brink of death, a miracle had occurred. A silver-armored warrior had streaked through the air, his sword flashing as he cleaved the wyvern, restraining Shin into countless pieces. Then, as if it were nothing, the warrior turned slightly, his voice warm and steady, asking, "Hey kid, you okay?" That childhood memory remained etched in Shin's mind even to this day. He had been saved by that symbol of power, and because of that, he had wanted to become just like them. "I really gave it my all," Shin thought. "So why? No matter how many monsters I cut down, I never got any stronger. I could never avenge anything." The helplessness of watching his comrades fall one by one had been burned into his soul. Back in the present, Shin had just finished taking down the 3 wyverns that had planned to turn him into their next meal. But as he had admitted earlier, his body had long reached the age of retirement. After dealing with just a few monsters, he was already gasping for air, using his sword as a crutch just to keep himself from collapsing. "Damn it, my body's really giving out on me. This is bad," he muttered, his voice trembling with exhaustion. His body shook, but this was far from over. Those 3 wyverns were just the appetizer. Suddenly the ground quaked. A deep, thunderous tremor signaled the arrival of something far worse. Shin's eyes narrowed as he slowly turned his gaze forward. Standing before him was a massive dragon, its entire body clad in gleaming crimson scales that shimmered like molten metal. The moment the dragon locked eyes with Shin, it wasted no time. It let out a deafening roar, then opened its jaws wide, gathering a blistering inferno within its mouth. The heat waves radiated outward, distorting the very air around them. Shin could only respond with a strained, bitter smile. "I have no family. My life has been one endless failure, filled with nothing but regrets. Damn it, I'm screwed. To hell with this, I want a regression," he cursed internally. But time did not wait for him. The battle raged on fiercely, and by the time it concluded, the once vibrant landscape had been transformed into a desolate wasteland, ravaged beyond recognition. The battlefield was littered with the lifeless bodies of countless dragons, a grim testament to the ferocity of the conflict. Miraculously, amidst the devastation, the protagonist, Shin, remained alive. His sword was deeply embedded in the skull of an unfamiliar dragon, marking his final victory. At that moment, a system notification appeared before him. "Congratulations! You have conquered the ancient dragon nest dungeon." However, Shin ignored it entirely. Instead, he threw his head back and let out a loud, frustrated yell toward the sky. "For God's sake, why the hell am I pushing myself this hard when I'm almost 60? He shouted. Shin Sang-yun, the nameless swordsman, was 55 years old. He had dedicated 30 years of his life to being a swordsman, yet his greatest achievement was merely ranking within the top 100 in his homeland. Considering the vast number of players worldwide, this accomplishment rendered him little more than a nameless nobody. Shifting back to Shin's perspective, after leaping off the massive dragon's corpse, he unexpectedly discovered a glowing skill book lying nearby. Surprised, he muttered to himself, "Oh, so my reward this time is a skill book? I've devoured artifacts before. Can I eat this too?" But before he could act, a sudden flash of light appeared beside him, instantly drawing his attention. Turning his gaze toward the source, he saw a spatial gate materialize before him. From within the swirling portal, a young man with golden hair, glasses, and a book in hand gracefully leaped out. Simultaneously, a system notification popped up in front of Shin. The constellation "Diligent Student Who Found Success Late" has entered. Diligent student who found success late kindly blesses you for your hard work. Additionally, he praises your flawless finishing move. Seeing this newcomer, Shin wasn't particularly surprised. After all, this person was none other than his contracted constellation, Diligent Student Who Found Success Late. "Ha ha, thanks," Shin replied, genuinely grateful that this constellation had chosen to form a contract with a mere third-rate swordsman like him. The perks of this contract were significant. If a player reached level 850, all artifact effects and title stats would be doubled. Upon reaching level 900, all stats would be tripled. However, with his current level sitting at 650, Shin had yet to reap any benefits from this arrangement. Unaware of Shin's inner thoughts, the blonde constellation suddenly transformed into a chibi version of himself, floating closer and urging Shin to hurry up and consume the skill book. Hearing this, Shin let out an awkward chuckle. "Ha ha ha, I was planning to eat it anyway. All right, here goes." With that, he stretched out his palm toward the skill book and activated his unique ability, Artifact Devourer. This is the only skill I've had since my awakening. To understand how it works, I tried cooking and eating artifacts. I even fried them, but there was no difference. By the time I finished my useless experiments, 30 years had passed. It was only when I attempted to synchronize my mana with an artifact of the right rank that I realized it activated my Artifact Devourer skill. But by then, it was already too late. Others had grown powerful the moment they awakened. Shin reflected. Before him, the skill book glowed brilliantly as his ability took effect. However, just a few seconds later, the light suddenly flickered out, snuffed out like a flame doused in water. "That's it? Nothing happened?" Shin muttered in disbelief. Silence followed, and then frustration surged within him. In one swift motion, he grabbed the book and hurled it forward. "Shouldn't this thing come with some kind of instructions? There's no way this is an actual skill book," he exclaimed. Beside him, his constellation companion scratched his head in confusion. "There's not much information available about pre-existing skills. Sorry, I can't be of much help," he admitted apologetically. He reassured Shin, saying there was still time, and suggested he try again, perhaps by synchronizing his mana once more. But instead of comforting him, those words seemed to ignite a fire within Shin. His teeth clenched, and the corners of his eyes stung as a sudden wave of emotion crashed over him. Time? Who told you I still have time? I'm almost 60. If I had a kid at 30, they'd be nearly 30 by now. And if I had them even earlier, I'd probably have grandkids already. You might not understand this because you're a constellation, but humans don't live that long. Shin snapped. Across from him, the blonde constellation paled, cold sweat beading on his forehead. I'm sorry if I said something wrong," he stammered. Back to Shin's perspective. Seeing himself lash out at his closest companion over nothing, he realized it wasn't right. His face softened, and he let out a weary sigh, shaking his head. "No, you didn't say anything wrong. It's just, my life is full of regrets. I can't forget that person's silhouette. I tried so hard to become like him, but now I'm exhausted. I'm too old." His voice trailed off, his words left hanging in the air. Hearing Shin's lament, the young constellation fell silent, deep in thought. Then, as if reaching a decision, he broke into a smile. Shin, oblivious to this, scratched his head and said, "Anyway, I was planning to retire. Take note. I'm canceling our contract. You should find someone else to play with." Before he could finish his sentence, Shin suddenly noticed the space around him distorting. The world itself seemed to bend and melt away. At that moment, a system notification flashed before his eyes. Constellation diligent student who succeeded late is maximizing the essence. You have been exposed to regression. Initiated scene transition. The scene shifted to an outdoor interview under the bright sun. A handsome reporter with brown hair turned to the person beside him. Dungeons and gates. They're the basic environments for awakened individuals, or in other words, where players work, right? The person he was speaking to was a striking woman with red hair and neatly tied back hair, Han Hyan Zhong, CEO of Hyan Zhong Group. "That's right," she confirmed. "You can think of dungeons as stepping stones for players. As for gates, they lead to different dimensions, unknown territories that players must pioneer and explore." Back to the main character's perspective, Shin watched the interview on TV and finally confirmed his current situation. As he wiped down the short sword in his hands, he flashed a grin. "I really did regress. It's been ages since I last saw this broadcast. Now I get it. But 4 days have already passed. That means I've returned to 30 years ago, the moment my constellation activated his ability." Shin had lost consciousness when the constellation activated his ability. When he woke up, he found himself in the apartment he had lived in 30 years ago, no longer in his 55-year-old body. Now he was 25, armed with all the memories of his past life. No matter how I think about it, my regression was definitely caused by the constellation's magic. There's no other explanation. But still, I can't help but feel a little overwhelmed, he exhaled. "Oh well, no big deal. I should head out and get to work, right?" With that, Shin tightened his grip around the short sword in his hand. As expected, information about the weapon immediately appeared before him. The Venomous Dagger. Artifact rank, Bronze. Weapon type, one-handed dagger. Attack power, +17. Speed, bonus, +10. Description. A self-defense dagger that does not dull easily. Looking at the dagger, a nostalgic glint appeared in Shin's eyes. "This is the bronze-ranked dagger I was lucky enough to get at this point in time. It's ranked low, but I know its hidden skill." Without hesitation, Shin activated Devour artifact, causing the dagger to emit a brilliant flash of light. A system window appeared before him. Absorption rate calculated. Base absorption rate for bronze artifacts, 10%. Past usage evaluation applied. Absorption rate increased to 20%. Since I didn't use it for long, the absorption rate is low. But what really matters is its hidden skill, Shin thought. Mana synchronization with Venomous Dagger initiated. Entering the unconscious realm. As the notification rang out, Shin's consciousness was pulled into a pitch-black space void of any light. The unconscious realm. This is the place I need to pass through in order to devour an artifact. I always get nervous coming here. I never know what kind of food will appear, he muttered. Despite his words, he smiled in anticipation. Sure enough, before he could wait any longer, something suddenly emerged in front of him. A roast chicken glowing with a gentle light. "This is barbecue roast chicken with olive oil," Shin observed. Seeing the dish's appetizing appearance, he let out a sigh of relief. "I'm glad it's something normal. I was worried it might be something disgusting like a swamp centipede, but if it's a meal like this, I can eat it easily." Smirking, he reached out, tore off a drumstick, and took a bite. As each mouthful was swallowed, the system notifications continued. "The Venomous Dagger is being absorbed. Speed +2 acquired. New skill obtained. Phantom Step. Venomous Dagger. The absorbed artifact has been permanently erased." Just like that, after finishing the roast chicken, Shin's consciousness was forcefully ejected from the unconscious realm. He rubbed his stomach, let out a deep sigh, and nodded as he reviewed the system confirmation screen. It's a shame the dagger got destroyed. Well, I wasn't using it anyway. At least I absorbed a useful skill as planned. Now then, time to move on. Time passed quickly, and the scene shifted to a bustling city street where a massive blue portal stood tall in the center. Surrounding it were numerous awakened individuals, all preparing for the upcoming dungeon expedition. This was dungeon number 85. The awakened individuals gathered here belonged to Yoon Daek-young's team. Just then, a man dressed in work attire came rushing toward Yoon Daek-young, visibly panicked. "Captain! Captain Yoon Daek-young!" Hearing someone call his name, Yoon Daek-young paused his paperwork and looked up. "Huh? What's got the gatekeeping team leader so worked up?" The blue-uniformed man scratched his head awkwardly before replying. "Well, one of my team members got pulled out. He's a newbie who joined just 4 days ago. His name is Shin Sang-hyun." "Ah, don't worry about it," Yoon Daek-young replied nonchalantly. "Shin Sang-hyun has already been transferred to the player team." But instead of calming down, the gatekeeping team leader was stunned. His expression turned alarmed as he blurted out, "What? He joined the player team instead of the gatekeeping team? I approved the transfer myself. Is there a problem?" Yoon Daek-young admitted without hesitation. The blue-uniformed man immediately raised his voice in protest. "Of course there's a problem. He just awakened recently, and he hasn't even graduated from the player academy yet. You can't throw a kid like him into your team. If you do that, the whole squad will be unbalanced. How am I supposed to—" Before he could finish his rant, Yoon Daek-young let out a sigh and took a step forward, standing right in front of him. His piercing gaze locked onto the gatekeeping team leader. "The gatekeeping team handles all logistical matters, don't they?" Yoon Daek-young muttered. "That includes my team and the system's contribution distribution, right?" His eyes narrowed sharply, radiating an oppressive aura. The gatekeeping team leader gulped nervously, realizing the intimidating pressure exuding from Yoon Daek-young. Awkwardly scratching his head, he forced out a weak chuckle. "Ha, oh, of course, my apologies." With that, the man quickly scurried away. Watching the man's retreating figure, Yoon Daek-young scoffed and muttered with disdain, "Seriously, if you give those damn gatekeepers a chance to talk, this is exactly what happens. Balance? What a load of crap." Beside him, a young blonde awakened looked slightly surprised and asked, "But sir, why did you let him in? I didn't expect that at all." Hearing this, Yoon Daek-young smirked mockingly. "What, you two? Ha. If someone has to die, it'll be him, not us. He needs to cause trouble and die. That way, those damn gatekeepers will finally shut up, and just like that, we'll maintain our own value. Besides, what can a clueless rookie do?" Understanding the implication, the blonde subordinate burst out laughing. "Oh, ha. I had no idea that was your plan." At that exact moment, while they were still laughing among themselves, a voice suddenly interrupted them. "Hello. Starting today, I'll be working as a player. My name is Shin Sang-hyun." The moment he introduced himself, every pair of eyes in the area locked onto him, none of them particularly friendly. The gatekeeper team members glared at Shin, their eyes filled with resentment, while the awakened players eyed him with cunning amusement. Being stared at so intensely by so many people made Shin's scalp tingle slightly. "I expected this, but they're not even trying to hide their emotions." From Yoon Daek-young's perspective, he quickly masked his true expression and put on a bright smile. "Finally, our new recruit has arrived. Shin, right? Nice to meet you. I figured you'd be late for your first day as a player." As he spoke, his gaze shifted to the weapon Shin was carrying, and he narrowed his eyes slightly. "Oh, your weapon. Is that a longsword?" Opposite him, Shin put on a polite smile and explained, "Yes, that's right. I've learned from watching a lot of YouTube videos." Yoon Daek-young raised an eyebrow and gave a pointed reminder. "You do know that the longsword is one of the hardest weapons to wield, right?" Shin clenched his fist and responded, his voice filled with determination. "I'll do my best to protect myself. Trust me." Shin's response seemed to amuse the captain. With a wide grin, Yoon Daek-young threw an arm around his shoulder and spoke enthusiastically. "Ha, good spirit. That's what I like to see. A real man should have that kind of drive, just like me." After saying that, he turned to address the rest of the team. "All right, let's get this dungeon run started. Time to fight." Hearing his command, the other team members cheered loudly, raising their fists into the air. With Shin now in the group, everyone quickly checked their equipment before stepping into the massive portal one by one. Meanwhile, Yoon Dik-young stood off to the side, making sure the entire team entered in an orderly manner. As he watched Shin's back, his expression remained neutral, but inside, he was full of scorn. He learned from YouTube? What a joke. Does he think dungeons are some kind of game? Just because he awakened and became a player, he's already getting cocky. Looks like he's asking for death. A cold smirk formed in his mind as he continued. Given the conquest strategy I have in place, this orc dungeon is known as the Wailing Wall for rookies. He'll learn his place soon enough. Stupid brat. That was what Yoon Dik-young firmly believed. But just moments after stepping inside, his face turned deathly pale. Sweat began to pour down his forehead as he took in the shocking sight in front of him. Lying all across the dungeon floor in a horrifying mess were the corpses of countless orcs, completely obliterated. And the cause of this carnage? None other than Shin himself. In that instant, Yoon Dik-young's mind screamed in disbelief. This is insane! Who the hell is this guy? Orcs were creatures that almost exclusively appeared in games, novels, and fantasy films. Because they were so frequently depicted, it was easy to assume they were weak compared to other monsters like dragons. They were often portrayed as dumb, violent, and little else. This misconception led many new players, filled with arrogance, to rush into battles with orcs without a second thought. In reality, their attributes were anything but weak. On average, an orc stood around 250 centimeters tall and weighed roughly 180 kilograms. Their sheer size alone granted them overwhelming strength compared to humans, earning them the infamous nickname, the Wailing Wall. The scene shifted to the inside of a dungeon, which resembled the long corridors of an ancient fortress. As the group moved forward, a dark-haired man glanced back and reminded the protagonist, Shin Sang-yun, not to expect any special treatment just because he was new. He sternly told Shin that from that moment on, he would be on his own. Shin's eyes flickered with mild surprise, but before he could respond, the captain of the porter squad spat on the ground and scoffed from behind. The captain mocked Shin, calling him an arrogant little brat who had just awakened and was already acting like a seasoned player. For most, such words would have been deeply insulting. But Shin, having lived to the age of 55, had endured countless hardships, beatings, and the cruelties of society. He wasn't the type to take offense easily. Instead, he simply scratched his head and chuckled, saying he would do his best. Internally, he noted that no one there seemed particularly kind to rookies. Despite Shin's lighthearted response, the dark-haired man in armor remained irritable. He snapped at Shin, emphasizing that it wasn't about doing his best, but about doing things right. Trying his best, he said, was useless. Shin's expression remained calm, and after a brief pause, he asked if he would be allowed to fight on the front lines if they encountered monsters. The armored man scowled and asked if Shin was out of his mind. Before he could continue berating Shin, his expression suddenly shifted to one of alarm. He urgently warned the group that an orc was approaching. Upon hearing this, Shin and the leader of the porters immediately turned around. Sure enough, a green-skinned orc with bulging muscles was closing in on them from behind, gripping a massive axe. Instead of feeling fear, Shin felt a surge of excitement. He thought to himself that this would be his first battle since his regression and decided to take it on. Before Shin could even finish his thought, the armored man rushed forward, shield in hand, slamming directly into the orc's body and temporarily stopping its movement. Seeing this, the black-haired man's face twisted in shock as he yelled at Shin, calling him an idiot for moving so slowly and questioning his ability to wield a great sword properly. Shin calmly reminded him that he didn't have to help. The black-haired man, now even more frustrated, shouted at Shin to prove his skills. In his flustered state, he failed to notice that the orc had already raised its axe high, preparing to strike. Shin quickly pointed this out, but the black-haired man scoffed and turned back, only to realize too late that the orc's axe was inches from his face. He could even smell the rusty metal and the dried blood clinging to its surface. For a split second, he thought he was done for. Just before the deadly blow could land, Yoon Daik-young, the leader of the team, barreled in like a human tank. With sheer brute force, he slammed his shield directly into the orc's face, sending the massive creature flying backward and crashing into the ground, leaving a small crater upon impact. Seeing that the orc was temporarily incapacitated, Yoon Daik-young turned and bellowed at the two of them, demanding they focus and stop treating the situation like a playground. The black-haired man stammered an apology, while the others looked on, amazed by Yoon Daik-young's quick reflexes. Yoon Daik-young drew his sword and took a battle-ready stance, ordering the others to fall back as he would handle the orc. At the same time, the orc had already recovered, letting out a terrifying roar before charging forward in a blind frenzy. Its axe came crashing down against Yoon Daik-young's shield, creating a deafening clang that echoed through the air. However, Yoon Daik-young lived up to his title as the team leader. His strength was extraordinary, and the moment he blocked the orc's attack, he drove his sword straight into the left side of the monster's chest. Thick streams of green blood poured out as the orc staggered. Behind him, the rest of the team clenched their fists, their faces lit up with excitement. They murmured in awe, believing the captain had pierced the orc's heart and defeated it. However, things didn't go as expected. Despite having a sword embedded deep in its chest, the orc suddenly grinned, its expression wild and exhilarated, as if the injury were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Letting out another deafening roar, it gripped its axe tightly and swung it forward with tremendous force. The sheer power of the strike shattered the ground beneath them, leaving a small crater in its wake. Fortunately, Yoon Daik-young had sensed the danger just in time and leapt backward to create distance. From Shin's perspective, as he watched the two muscular figures clash, his experience told him there was a problem. Yoon Daik-young was likely the highest-leveled fighter there, but at best, he was only around level 50, nowhere near strong enough to land a fatal strike on the orc. Shifting back to the battlefield, Yoon Daik-young let out a fierce battle cry, tightening his grip on his sword before launching himself forward. Seizing the opportunity while the orc was still reacting to its previous attack, he drove his blade deep into its body once more. This time, it was a perfectly executed critical strike. No matter how resilient the orc was, there was no surviving such a blow. As the massive creature finally collapsed to the ground, lifeless, the lower-ranked hunters erupted into cheers, praising Yoon Daik-young for taking down an orc by himself. Yoon Daik-young let out a small breath of relief before turning back to check on his team. He asked if everyone was all right, and the older awakened ones responded with cheerful grins, calling him seriously reliable. Just as Yoon Daik-young ordered the group to move out, eerie, blood-curdling screams rang out from the distance, immediately drawing their attention. They turned around to see an intimidating sight, a group of red-skinned orcs marching toward them, their expressions full of aggression as if they were actively seeking a fight. The orcs were well equipped, their sharp weapons glinting menacingly. Cold sweat began to trickle down the faces of the older awakened ones as they realized the severity of the situation. One of them nervously asked Yoon Daik-young what they should do now, referring to the approaching armored orcs. Taking in the enemy's numbers and their well-equipped state, Yoon Daik-young immediately began reconsidering his options. He cleared his throat and suggested that it would be best for them to retreat and ensure the team's safety. He admitted that deep down, he felt a pang of regret. Just as they had finally taken down one enemy, an entire squad of orcs appeared. Unlike the others, who were paralyzed by fear, Shin's eyes lit up at the sight of the approaching monsters. Without hesitation, he made a bold suggestion, asking if he could give it a shot. His words instantly earned him a series of outraged glares from the weaker hunters around him. They exclaimed in disbelief, questioning whether Shin Sang-hyun had lost his mind. On the side, Yoon Dek-young, the captain, apologized, admitting that he should have trained Shin properly before bringing him to the battlefield. He let out a deep sigh and tried to reason with Shin, acknowledging his excitement about awakening. However, before Yoon could finish his sentence, Shin had already gripped his greatsword and launched himself forward like a gust of wind. The entire group stood frozen in shock. Yoon Dek-young called after him, warning that he was going to get himself killed. Contrary to everyone's expectations, the moment Shin closed the distance, he swung his greatsword with a single devastating strike, effortlessly slicing a young red-skinned orc clean in half. For a brief moment, an eerie silence blanketed the battlefield. Only Shin's voice broke through as he remarked how amazing greatswords were. Behind him, after several seconds of stunned silence, the so-called weaker hunters began sweating profusely. Their eyes filled with disbelief, as if they had just witnessed a prehistoric beast come back to life. They muttered among themselves, questioning what had just happened. An elite orc had been cut in half, and even with a greatsword it seemed absurd. Ignoring their murmurs, Shin casually rested his greatsword on his shoulder and chuckled, wondering if he was still level 1. He commented that his swing hadn't been as smooth as he wanted. A display of his player information appeared. Name, Shin Sang-hyun, level 1, title, none, constellation, none, unique skill, artifact absorption, artifacts consumed, 1, health 25, energy 20, experience 40. On the other side, the remaining orcs clenched their teeth, veins bulging across their furious faces as they watched their comrade get effortlessly cut down. Then, as if some unspoken command had passed between them, they all roared in unison and charged at Shin like rabid dogs lunging for a bite. Seeing this, Shin tightened his grip around his sword, his voice cold and unwavering. He stated that his level might be low, but he had experience to spare. In a blur, both sides dashed past each other. With a single, almost effortless swing of his great sword, Shin sliced through the orcs with ease, their bodies cleaving apart like fragile dolls. However, at that very moment, an orc wearing a bone mask lunged at him, its sharp axe arcing through the air, aiming straight for Shin. Without breaking a sweat, Shin twisted his body slightly, sidestepping the strike with minimal movement. Then, in one swift motion, he swung his sword upward, severing the orc's arm and splitting its face in two. He scoffed, his voice dripping with amusement, asking if the orc had any idea how many monsters like it he had killed in his younger days. Meanwhile, the awakened hunters in the back could only stare in utter disbelief. Someone muttered in shock, questioning if that was really Shin Sang-hyun. They speculated that he might just wipe out all of them at this rate, calling the situation insane. Back on the battlefield, Shin now stood face to face with the leader of the orc squad. He declared that only the orc warlord remained, his eyes locked onto his final opponent. Unlike the others, this orc was a towering figure, dwarfing even the already massive members of its species. But it wasn't just its size that made it dangerous. It was clad in full armor, heavily equipped for battle. The warlord scanned the battlefield, its bloodshot eyes taking in the remains of its fallen kin. Rage swelled within its chest, and with a deafening roar, it lifted its massive spiked club and swung it downward with overwhelming force, aiming to crush Shin in a single blow. Seeing this, Shin wasted no time and leapt to the side, dodging the attack in a blink. The unfortunate wall behind him, however, wasn't so lucky. It exploded into rubble under the sheer force of the orc's strike. But Shin didn't even glance at the destruction. Mid-air, he twisted his body and swung his greatsword in a clean, decisive arc, slicing straight through the warlord's thick neck. However, the wound Shin had just inflicted was too shallow, not nearly enough to take down the monstrous orc. Seeing this, the squad leader, clearly worried, shouted that the orc's skin was too thick and that their attacks were useless. He concluded that they were screwed. Before the orc leader's words could fully settle in the air, it seized the moment Shin landed, letting out a fierce roar. It swung its massive arm backward, bringing its colossal war club down toward Shin's much smaller frame. Yet, Shin showed no sign of concern whatsoever. "Calm down, will you?" he said casually, his voice steady. At the same time, he activated his skill, Demon Breaker. A system notification appeared. Hidden skill activated. Status abnormality blocked. Cooldown, 15 seconds. Skill level, 1. Effect. When attacking a target, be it human or monster, the target will be immobilized for 2 seconds. Success rate and duration depend on the target's resistance level. The moment the skill took effect, the orc leader's entire body froze in place. Its weapon, which had been mid-swing, halted abruptly, and its massive frame trembled violently as it struggled against the invisible force restraining it. Seeing this, Shin grinned, his eyes narrowing in amusement. "Yeah, just stay put like that," he chuckled. Across from him, the orc leader let out a panicked howl, but before it could even comprehend what was happening, Shin's razor-sharp blade had already sliced clean through its thick neck, sending its head flying. The orc's massive body collapsed to the ground with a heavy thud, while its severed head rolled to a stop at the feet of Yoon Daek-young, who stood watching from a short distance away. The sheer brutality of the scene left everyone in stunned silence. "What the hell did I just witness?" someone muttered. "Didn't he just awaken 3 days ago?" another stammered. "And that disruption skill he used, isn't that supposed to be an advanced ability? I thought even high-ranked players could only stun an enemy for like 1.5 seconds at most, and he's wielding a great sword like he's been doing it his whole life. Should we ask him what kind of YouTube videos he's been watching?" A chorus of whispers and murmurs of admiration spread through the group. Meanwhile, Yoon Daek-young stood frozen, his mind racing. Watching Shin display such overwhelming strength was nothing short of baffling. Did he really just use a high-level skill? And against an armored orc, no less. He's only been awakened for a few days, hasn't he? Where the hell did he even get a skill like that? The more he thought about it, the more intrigued he became. A system notification appeared. "Congratulations! You have leveled up. You have met the requirements to receive a title. You have obtained the title, Fearless Immature Puppy. Title rank, F effect +5 evasion." Seeing the unexpected reward from the system, Shin felt both surprised and excited. "I wasn't really paying much attention to leveling up, but I didn't expect to get a title and a bonus effect on top of that. This is amazing." The system then continued with another notification. "You have unallocated stat points. Please choose a stat to enhance." Available points, 1. At the same time, the system interface shifted to his attribute screen. Seeing this, Shin reached his hand forward to allocate his points. "I already know which stat I want to increase. In my past life, I learned this lesson far too late. Luck directly affects skill accuracy and item drop rates. And right now, I need it more than anything." Without hesitation, he immediately allocated his newly earned free stat point into luck. However, before he could take a moment to analyze things further, Yoon Daek-young suddenly stepped forward from behind and started questioning him. "Are you really Shin Sang-hyun? That skill you just used, disruption, where did you get it from?" Shin found himself slightly caught off guard by the question. "I just regressed, and I've only been using my skills for good, but even so, I can't exactly tell him the truth." With that in mind, he quickly made something up. "Ah, I had it the moment I awakened," he replied casually. Of course, Yoon Daek-young wasn't going to accept such a vague answer. He immediately pointed a finger at Shin and pressed further. "Do you even hear yourself? That doesn't make any sense. Stop trying to dodge the question. Are you absolutely sure? Did you just get lucky and stumble upon a diamond-tier artifact or something even higher?" His gaze then shifted toward the greatsword in Shin's hands, clearly assuming that all of Shin's strength came from the weapon. Noticing the suspicion in Yoon Daek-young's eyes, Shin simply extended his sword toward him and smirked. "Would you like to check it out for yourself?" On this side, Captain Yoon Daek-young was slightly taken aback by how casually Shin handed over his weapon. However, he still accepted the greatsword to inspect it. Yeah, all right. If you're offering..." With that, he focused on examining the weapon, and in an instant, all of its details were displayed clearly before his eyes. Faded greatsword. Type: two-handed weapon. Weapon class: greatsword. Attack power: 50. Effect: none. Description: a standard greatsword with a simple design, offering no special abilities. As soon as he saw the information provided by the system, Yoon Daek-young practically screamed like his house was on fire. "What the hell? This is seriously just a normal greatsword? That means that skill was really yours?" His jaw clenched, and veins started to pop on his forehead as he silently cursed in his head. "Son of a... I've been raiding dungeons for 2 damn years, grinding my way up to level 50, and my skills still aren't as good as his. If this keeps up, then the reward distribution today..." Before he could spiral any further, a teammate suddenly shouted, "Captain, the sub-boss just showed up." Hearing that, the rest of the team turned their eyes toward Yoon Daek-young, waiting for his command. His face darkened slightly, but he quickly gave out orders. "All right, let's move then." He turned to Shin and said, "Thanks to you, we had an easier time clearing out those small fry. But don't get cocky and end up dead. A flashy skill like yours won't do jack against the demonic orc we're about to face." Shin tilted his head slightly, finding Yoon Daek-young's attitude a little strange. However, as if remembering something, a smirk slowly formed on his lips. I almost forgot why I joined this team right after regressing. This team distributes rewards based on contribution." With that, he suddenly called out, "Hey, Captain!" Yoon Daek-young turned back with a frown. Shin flashed a bright grin and asked, "If I kill the demonic orc myself, can I take the artifact as my reward?" The red crystal was a rare loot that could only be obtained by defeating the demonic orc. Even then, it was known to be incredibly difficult to acquire. No, rather, the drop rate was absurdly low. However, in his past life, after his team had failed to take down the demonic orc, Shin had witnessed another team successfully obtaining the red crystal. He still remembered that moment vividly, the sight of the victorious party standing over the slain demonic orc, holding the precious crystal in their hands. One of the team members had exclaimed in amazement, congratulating their captain and asking how he had managed to get such a valuable item. The crystal was worth a fortune at the market and was known to be the only artifact possessing the delay skill. As they stared at it with eyes full of greed, their captain, looking slightly uncomfortable, had waved them off and told them to calm down, complaining that they were practically spitting all over him. The delay skill was precisely what Shin desperately needed at that moment. Brushing aside the memories, he returned to the present and repeated his request. His words left the entire team momentarily stunned. Noticing their reaction, he quickly elaborated on his reasoning. He reminded them that their team distributed rewards based on contribution. So, if he managed to kill the boss himself, there should be no issue. At this, Yoon Daek-young fell silent. The pause in conversation made a drop of sweat trickle down Shin's face. He knew he needed the delay skill as soon as possible. It was crucial for the events that were about to unfold. But to the others, he must have seemed like an arrogant rookie, trying to take on more than he could handle. There was no way they would take him seriously. As expected, 2 of the weaker team members, oblivious to their own lack of strength, glared at him with contempt. They accused him of being out of his mind and demanded to know who he thought he was. Killing a few orcs had clearly made him overconfident, and now he was talking about loot distribution as if he had already earned a right to it. Before they could continue, Yoon Daek-young calmly raised a hand, silencing them. He then turned to Shin with a sharp gaze and stated his terms. If they failed to defeat the boss, then, and only then, would Shin be allowed to enter the dungeon and take it on himself. His warning was clear: but just the fact that Yoon Daek-young agreed to distribute loot based on contribution was enough to make Shin feel relieved. It had been easier than he expected. To confirm, Shin asked again if that meant he would be sitting out of this fight. Yoon Daek-young, clearly irritated, snapped at him to do whatever he wanted before turning away and marching ahead. Deep down, he despised Shin's attitude. To him, Shin was just an arrogant upstart acting high and mighty simply because he had one overpowered skill. Yoon Daek-young was determined to clear the dungeon himself and prove that experience was what truly mattered on the battlefield. Fueled by that resolve, Yoon Daek-young raised his hand and pushed open the massive door in front of them. Inside the dimly lit chamber, a towering orc wielding an enormous battle axe awaited them. At that moment, a system notification appeared for the party. You have entered the mid-boss's chamber. The demonic orc berserker was unlike any of the orcs they had fought before. It stood massive and muscular, its purple skin rippling with sheer brute strength. Curved, goat-like horns jutted out from its skull, and embedded deep within its chest was a gleaming red crystal. Heavy iron chains wrapped around its body, clinking ominously as it moved. This was the mid-boss, the bloodthirsty demonic orc. Seeing the beast's menacing form, Yoon Daek-young's expression turned serious. He gripped his sword tightly and barked out commands, instructing the team to prepare for battle and surround the creature, attacking from behind. Though the monster was intimidating, Yoon Daek-young wasn't particularly worried. Yoon Daek-young had heard rumors about the boss they were about to face. It looked formidable, but word had it that it was actually easy to bring down. He found it amusing that Shin Sang-yeon wouldn't even get the chance to fight it solo. Just picturing Shin's shocked and helpless face as they took down the boss brought a smirk to Yoon Daek-young's lips. However, fantasies remained just that. Fantasies. Reality hit hard and fast. Snapping back to his senses, Yoon Daek-young shouted that he would take the lead. At his command, the entire team charged forward, using him as the spearhead against the bloodthirsty demonic orc. Moments later, all of Yoon Daek-young's hopes of victory had crumbled. As he slowly regained consciousness from his dazed state, he mumbled in disbelief, struggling to process what had just happened. Nearby, Shin stood casually against the dungeon wall. Seeing Yoon Daek-young wake up, he merely clicked his tongue and shook his head, remarking that he had been slightly worried when the team rushed in like that, but he never expected them to charge straight at the boss like idiots. He muttered to himself that this was exactly why they had failed in his past life as well. Meanwhile, the other surviving party members hurried to their fallen leader, scrambling to help him up. Panic filled their voices as they anxiously asked what they should do next, fearing that if things continued like this, they would all be dead. Yoon Daek-young, however, remained silent, his gaze locked onto the demonic orc ahead. His brow furrowed in confusion. Why were not just this boss but even the previous orcs so unbelievably strong? Cursing under his breath, he admitted to himself that he never should have trusted the market intel. Gritting his teeth, he made a bitter decision. They needed to retreat. There was no way they could win today. But just as he prepared to issue the order, something caught his attention. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed Shin still standing there, arms crossed, a relaxed smile on his face. A sick feeling churned in Yoon Daek-young's stomach. That look, that attitude, Shin still wanted to fight. Unlike Shin's unshaken demeanor, a blonde-haired party member was visibly seething, grinding his teeth in frustration, as if Shin owed him money. He exploded in anger, demanding to know if Shin was insane and questioning what was wrong with him. Before the blonde-haired man could continue his rant, Yoon Daek-young abruptly swung out an arm, silencing him. With a firm voice, he ordered everyone to fall back, explaining that the boss had terrible peripheral vision and that they could slip past its blind spot. The rest of the party exhaled in relief. Someone even muttered a quiet thanks to the heavens. As Yoon Dek-young turned away, blood dripping down his face, he cast one last glance at Shin. He warned him that if he died, he had only himself to blame. In response, Shin let out a faint chuckle. Slowly drawing the sword from his back, his voice remained steady, filled with confidence. He reassured Yoon Dek-young that there was no need to worry. He had no intention of dying that day. Facing the bloodthirsty, demonic orc across from him, Shin steadied himself. As if sensing the killing intent radiating from him, the monstrous orc boss clenched its massive battle axe tightly, its eyes burning with fury. Without hesitation, it charged forward like a raging tank, exuding an overwhelming aura of aggression. Seeing this, Shin took a deep breath, his grip on the sword instinctively tightening. A thought flashed through his mind. If this fight were purely about stats, he wouldn't stand a chance. But with all the experience he had accumulated, that was no longer an issue. With that realization, he swiftly swung his sword to the right, deflecting the orc's battle axe to the side. In an instant, a piercing metallic crash rang through the air as steel collided with steel. The demon orc let out a low, guttural growl, clearly startled by the unexpected resistance. Meanwhile, the awakened fighters who had been preparing to retreat suddenly halted in their tracks upon hearing a loud metallic clash. They turned to one another, exchanging puzzled looks. One of them muttered in disbelief, wondering aloud if they had truly heard a loud clang. Another asked if Shin had just knocked the orc's axe away. Back on the battlefield, Shin flexed his now numb wrist and let out a casual complaint, remarking that his hand had gone numb. He noted that he could only deflect strikes, not counter them. Then, as if spotting something fascinating, his gaze locked onto the glowing red gemstone embedded in the demon orc's chest. A smirk spread across his face as he muttered that it had been a long time since he had seen that gemstone. He referred to it as the ultimate combo, his interest in it evident. Shin's obsession with the red gemstone was not without reason. It possessed a special effect that, when combined with his delay skill and the title skill Demon Crusher, could create something truly terrifying. At present, Demon Crusher's stun effect lasted for only 2 seconds, which was already useful but difficult to improve. However, with his core skill, Artifact Devourer, he had the ability to merge the effects of different abilities. This gave him an idea. What if he could stack the stun effect from Demon Crusher? He realized that this could lead to the perfect skill combination, an infinite stun lock. If he could obtain delay, this possibility would become a reality. The mere thought of paralyzing enemies endlessly while they remained completely helpless sent waves of excitement surging through him. His smirk widened as he confidently raised his sword and taunted the monster, asking what it was waiting for. As if understanding his provocation, thick veins pulsed across the demon orc's forehead like writhing worms. With an ear-splitting roar, it launched itself straight at Shin, its monstrous energy surging as it prepared to strike with devastating force. However, this was exactly what Shin had been hoping for. He thought to himself that it was perfect, just what he wanted. If the monster charged at him recklessly, he would have the perfect chance to uncover its weaknesses. With that thought, Shin charged forward without hesitation. His sword sliced cleanly across the orc's side, leaving behind a deep wound. Thick streams of dark purple blood spurted from the gash, spilling onto the battlefield. At the same time, he activated his Demon Crusher skill. The demonic orc froze in place, stunned for 2 whole seconds. Its trembling hands could no longer grip its battle axe, and the massive weapon slipped from its grasp, crashing into the ground and forming a small crater upon impact. The other awakened fighters watching from behind stared in shock, their eyes practically popping out of their heads. One of them muttered that it felt like watching a scene from a fantasy movie, struggling to comprehend what they were witnessing. Another expressed disbelief that the Demon Crusher stun had actually worked on a mid-tier boss, calling it overpowered. Yoon Daek-young, unable to process the situation, mumbled under his breath in astonishment. Meanwhile, Shin let out a smug chuckle. He acknowledged that orcs were simple-minded, but pointed out that this was a demon orc. However, before he could finish his sentence, his voice suddenly cut off. Against all odds, the demon orc had already shaken off the stun effect and launched a vicious kick straight at him. Reacting on instinct, Shin raised his greatsword just in time, using it as a shield to absorb the blow. Even so, the sheer force of the impact sent his body flying backward. His sword dragged across the ground, carving a deep groove into the battlefield. As he steadied himself, his brows furrowed in frustration. He cursed under his breath, realizing that he had forgotten about the orc's regeneration ability. His gaze locked onto the wound he had inflicted, only to find that it was no longer there. A faint green glow pulsed across the demon orc's body, and within seconds, the deep gash had completely healed. The worst part was that this very same regeneration ability had allowed the demon orc to break free from the stun effect far earlier than expected. Shin clenched his jaw, acknowledging that the battle was going to be far tougher than he had initially thought. He needed 15 seconds before he could stun the monster again. That was why he had needed delay. However, if he could not keep the orc stunned, he resolved to take it down the old-fashioned way. The battle raged on. Across from Shin, the demonic orc tightened its grip on its battle axe once more, its bloodlust burning hotter than ever. The wounds Shin had inflicted only served to enrage the beast further. Now, the monster had only one thought in its mind: to crush him. A swift and decisive victory was all it desired. Yet again, the demon orc swung its mighty axe, but Shin deflected the attack effortlessly. He barely twitched a muscle as he guided the attack downward, burying the axe into the ground with a casual flick of his sword. With a grin, he remarked that this was easier than he had expected. And so, their clash continued, sword against axe. Each attack sent shockwaves rippling through the air, shaking the battlefield. Meanwhile, among the spectators, doubt was beginning to take hold. A blonde awakener stood off to the side, seemingly uninterested in the fight. Instead, he turned toward his commander and urged him to leave, insisting that even that bastard's skill was proving useless. Yoon Daek-young, the commander, appeared stunned, his voice laced with confusion. He questioned why the stun skill wasn't working, noting that the level gap was barely noticeable. He couldn't understand why Shin looked so confident. Was he really just a newbie? The thought gnawed at him. Something wasn't adding up. Back on the battlefield, Shin was growing bored. Deciding it was time to finish the fight, he acknowledged that he had been in situations like this before. If he wasn't strong enough, he simply had to put everything into a single decisive strike. Forget slashing the enemy apart. He would use their own power against them. Gripping his sword tightly, he waited, his eyes sharp as they tracked the demon orc's movements. Then, the perfect opening presented itself. With a flash of movement, Shin lunged forward. The orc charged at full speed, completely unaware that it was running straight into its own demise. Shin's blade pierced cleanly through its chest, striking straight through the heart. The orc let out a final gurgling gasp, coughing up a mouthful of blood before collapsing lifelessly. At the same time, a system notification appeared before Shin's eyes. "Congratulations! You have defeated the mid-boss, Demon Orc. You have leveled up. You have earned the title, Demon Hunter, rank E. Title effect: when facing mid-bosses or higher, your healing ability increases by 5x. Reading through the effect, Shin couldn't stop himself from grinning. 2 titles already. Was this what it felt like to play solo? Just as he was about to revel in his victory, his eyes caught movement. Commander Yoon Daek-young was slowly approaching, his wide eyes still filled with disbelief. Even now, he struggled to accept the reality before him. The very same mid-boss that had wiped out his entire team had just been crushed effortlessly by this so-called newbie. Seeing the stunned expressions of those around him, Shin quickly forced out a crooked smile. There was only one way to avoid unnecessary trouble. Activating his amateur acting skills, he raised his voice in a dramatic wail, lamenting how he had almost died and how he couldn't have managed without the commander dealing damage. The perfect bluff. The blonde awakener, completely unaware of the situation, immediately turned to his commander with admiration. He eagerly asked when the commander had even landed a hit on the monster. Yoon Dae-kyung, however, wasn't fooled. He knew very well that he hadn't even scratched the mid-boss. His gaze shifted toward Shin, filled with confusion. Meanwhile, Shin smirked internally. Surely the commander wasn't that dumb, right? He was throwing him a bone. He just had to take it. Yoon Dae-kyung's gaze drifted to the red crystal on the ground, and he instantly understood Shin's intention. Keep your promise. That's what he's saying. Letting out a defeated sigh, Yoon Dae-kyung mumbled to himself, admitting his complete loss. However, the moment of hesitation vanished as he straightened his posture. With renewed confidence, he turned toward his team and barked out orders. Announcing that the mid-boss was down, he commanded them to prepare for the final boss. "Yes, sir," the squad responded in unison before moving forward. As they ascended the stairs to the next floor, a few of them couldn't resist sneering at Shin. Some muttered how there was no way that kid had taken it down alone. Others wished they had the stun skill, though they admitted it hadn't even worked on the mid-boss. Shin ignored the chatter. His focus was elsewhere, on the true prize. His gaze locked onto the red crystal, the very thing he had been waiting for. Once the audience was gone, he smirked. Time to eat this thing. Item: red crystal. Rarity: silver. Type: special equipment. Accessory. Special effect: delays attribute decay, stat bonuses. +10 vitality, +10 strength. Description: a rare item obtainable only by defeating the demon orc. It contains condensed resilience and endurance. A smirk formed on Shin's lips as he picked up the crystal. Let's see what this thing can really do. A strange feast. The moment Shin absorbed the red crystal, his consciousness was pulled into a subconscious void. Before him sat a steaming dish, spicy cold noodles with jellied meat prepared by the super chef. Just looking at the dish, an uncontrollable hunger surged through him. Without hesitation, Shin grabbed the bowl, lifted his chopsticks, and began eating. As he devoured each strand of noodles, a series of system notifications appeared. You are now ready to absorb the red crystal. Absorbing red crystal. Based on the base absorption rate of 20% for silver tier items, your strength and vitality have increased by +2. You have obtained the special effect. Delay. You can now embed this effect into one of your skills. A bead of sweat rolled down Shin's temple. Why do I feel so uneasy about this? Which skill would you like to combine with delay? Add it to Demon Smash, Shin replied immediately. The system confirmed the combination. The delay effect has been added to Demon Smash. If you use Demon Smash before the first stun expires, the effect duration will extend as follows. Second and third hit, 90% success rate. Fourth hit, 60% success rate. Fifth hit, 30% success rate. The moment the message ended, Shin was thrown out of the subconscious space. He stared at the system screen in disbelief, eyes wide in shock. A guaranteed 4-second stun? I only thought it was theoretically possible, but it actually works. To confirm, he rubbed his eyes and double-checked the system logs. An unexpected proposal. Just then, a voice from behind interrupted his thoughts. Can we talk for a moment? Turning around, Shin saw Yoon Dae-kyung standing behind him. What now? Sure, what's up? Shin asked. Yoon Dae-kyung's tone was hesitant, but he spoke clearly. Right ahead is the final boss room. Shin raised an eyebrow. You want me to stay behind? But what the captain said next shocked him. No, I'd be a failure of a leader if I didn't know how to use a talent like you. Let's work together, Shin Sang-hyun. As he spoke, he extended his hand. It seemed that after Shin helped him save face, Yoon Dae-kyung had fully regained his composure and was now leading like a proper commander. Shin had no reason to refuse. Ha ha. but my conditions stay the same. He grinned, clasping Yoon Daek-young's hand. Yeah, I know. The captain chuckled in response. The final boss room. At that moment, the blonde awakener approached, arms crossed. Are we finally heading in? Yoon Daek-young nodded firmly. Yeah. From this point on, everyone needs to stay alert. But as they moved forward, the blonde suddenly clicked his tongue, shooting a glaring look at Shin. This left the protagonist utterly confused. The hell's his problem? Did he eat expired food or something? Meanwhile, Yoon Daek-young didn't seem to notice the blonde's sour attitude. With a bright grin, he patted Shin's shoulder. Let's finish this up. Drinks are on me after. Time flew by quickly as Shin's team finally stepped into the last boss room of dungeon number 85. Their opponent this time was a monstrous orc with ash-gray skin covered in strange, spiral-shaped runes that pulsed faintly. In its grip was a blood-stained spiked mace, still dripping from its last victim. An overwhelming savage aura radiated from the creature. This was the final boss, the frenzied orc, a captain's resolve. From Yoon Daek-young's perspective, after witnessing the sheer power of the previous boss, the demonic orc, he no longer underestimated this dungeon. A cold sweat dripped down his face as he took a determined step forward, looking at Shin. I'll go first. However, before the captain could recklessly charge in and get himself obliterated, Shin unsheathed his sword and shook his head. Stay close to me. Yoon Daek-young hesitated. Right now, you shouldn't. But before he could finish, Shin exhaled deeply, lost in thought. The frenzied orc has lower skill resistance than the demonic orc, which means it's easier to stun. As long as I stay calm and attack properly, this shouldn't be a problem. But stay close to me. Since when did I start saying things like that with such confidence? Back then, I was always scared. Even when I grew older, I barely managed to survive. I can't live like that again. I have to change my weak past and my future. And to do that, I'll show everyone here my overwhelming strength. An overwhelming display. With that resolve burning in his heart, Shin swung his sword down, slashing deep into the frenzied orc's torso. The wound tore from its abdomen to its shoulder, causing the beast to howl in agony. Without hesitation, Shin activated his skill. Demon Smash! A shockwave of force crashed into the orc, leaving it staggered and unable to move. It's stunned for 4 seconds, he shouted. Without missing a beat, Yoon Daek-young rushed forward, leading the charge. Now get him! With the boss completely immobilized, the entire team unleashed a relentless barrage of attacks, overwhelming the beast before it could even showcase its strength. And just like that, before the orc could land a single devastating strike, it collapsed, dead, dungeon complete. The moment its massive body hit the ground, a system notification rang out. Congratulations! You have defeated the final boss, the frenzied orc. Congratulations! You have completed the dungeon of the Red Orc Altar. Recognition and a glimpse of the future. As the lifeless body of the frenzied orc lay in a pool of its own blood, some members of the party couldn't help but remark, wasn't this dungeon way too easy? I didn't even have to use a single potion. Another adventurer chimed in, grinning. See? I told you that stun skill was amazing! Meanwhile, a group of porters huddled together, whispering among themselves while stealing glances at Shin. Do you think he has his own gate? Should I ask him? Huh? I was about to ask first. So what? I need to make a living too. Another porter scoffed. Their team captain retorted, shaking his head. A fast-changing world. Observing how quickly people's attitudes shifted, Shin couldn't help but feel a little dizzy. These guys flipped sides so fast, I wasn't even planning to do anything for them. Just as he finished that thought, a series of system notifications appeared before his eyes. Congratulations! You have leveled up. You have obtained the rank D title, Overwhelming Power. Effect: status effect durations are increased by 10%. Reading the title description, Shin nodded in satisfaction. Not bad. A 4.4-second stun? That's crazy. In my past life, I never earned a single title. But as he thought about that, his expression darkened slightly. Even so, this is nothing compared to him, Dugansu, the demon sword, the title collector, the perfect blade, the greatest swordsman in South Korea, a legendary player with countless titles. Only 2 years after the player era began, he had already surpassed level 500. Long before Shin's regression, he had always looked up to him, a warrior he deeply respected. But now, maybe I won't fall behind this time. If I start pushing myself now, maybe, just maybe, I'll have a chance. As his determination blazed within him, Shin's nostrils flared slightly, releasing a faint puff of white steam. The sudden sight startled the porters behind him. Even Yoon Daek-young couldn't help but raise an eyebrow and ask, "What are you doing?" Snapping out of it, Shin coughed awkwardly. "Ah, nothing. Just stretching." Yoon Daek-young didn't press further. Instead, he reached into his inventory and pulled out a small ring, tossing it to Shin. "Here, you did great. Take it." Catching the ring, Shin was genuinely surprised. "Wow, did someone possess you?" Yoon Daek-young gave a sheepish smile. "Hey, give me some credit. You really carried the team this time. Still, isn't this a bit much?" Daek-young shrugged nonchalantly. "It's just a bronze tier item. I can afford to be generous." Shin smirked. "You're a little too honest for your own good, you know." Yoon Daek-young waved him off with a laugh. "Hey, if it were expensive, I wouldn't have given it to you." But even as he spoke, a silent thought lingered in his mind. "I gave this to you because from now on, we'll probably never cross paths again. Like it or not, even I have to admit it, you live in a completely different world from the rest of us now." As Shin and Yoon Daek-young continued to laugh and chat, neither of them noticed the blonde-haired man standing behind them, biting his lip in silent fury. His eyes burned with resentment as he glared at them. "He cares more about that bastard just because he showed off his skills a few times? I've served him for so long, and yet this is how he repays me? This is unfair, completely unfair." A cold, murderous thought crept into his mind. Screw this. They should both just die. Without hesitation, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Time quickly passed, and the scene transitioned to Shin's apartment in Jamsil-dong, Sampa district. Sitting in front of his desk, Shin grinned from ear to ear as he checked his bank account. "This is insane. Now, this is why I became a player." A notification flashed on the screen. "Transaction complete. 200 coins received. The main exchange gate alone gives me 200 coins per day?" Shin chuckled, rubbing his chin. "Looks like he gave me twice the amount compared to the others, plus an extra bonus. Damn, I hit the jackpot." He put his phone down and turned his gaze toward the ring resting on the table. Frenzy ring. Rank, bronze, type, accessory, special effect, lightweight, attributes, strength, plus 10, description. A ring that can only be obtained from the frenzied orc. It causes the wearer to enter a state of rage. Special effect, lightweight. Consumes 1 mana per second to reduce the perceived weight of all equipped artifacts to 1 gram. Reading through its stats and effects, Shin couldn't help but admire its potential. Even though it's just a bronze tier item, I can't believe I got a free artifact with lightweight. His eyes glinted with understanding. Now I see why it's normally classified as silver. Most players exhaust their mana after just a few swings of their sword, but using 1 mana per second just to lighten their equipment? That's ridiculous. Who the hell would waste their mana on something like that? The thought made him chuckle to himself, but then his expression shifted, his grin turning sharper. Then again, none of that matters to me. Shin leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. In my past life, I only discovered my ability when I was already over 50 years old, but that's exactly why I trained so damn hard to master it. He recalled a crucial memory, a time when he consumed an artifact that required mana defunction, and the result? The penalty effect disappeared. Artifacts that drained mana always had a drawback, a side effect that made them difficult to use. But for Shin, when I absorbed them, the penalties vanished completely. Who cares about the drawbacks? The more abilities I collect, the better. With that thought in mind, he reached forward and placed his hand on the ring. A faint blue light began to swirl around his fingertips. Then, without hesitation, he started the absorption process. Meanwhile, at the H-Soul nightclub in Gangnam, the atmosphere was thick with smoke, alcohol, and the heavy beat of music. Amidst the neon glow, the blonde-haired man from Yoon Daek-young's party lounged in a private booth, his arm draped around a beautiful woman. but he wasn't enjoying the moment. He was ranting. "I'm telling you, it's true! That bastard has a stun skill that lasts for 4 whole seconds!" His voice was loud, too loud. Across from him, a thuggish-looking man narrowed his eyes in irritation. "Oi, who the hell do you think you're raising your voice at?" The blond man immediately shrank back, bowing his head. No, I'm sorry," the thug scoffed, his expression full of disdain. Then he leaned forward, eyes gliding dangerously. "So what? You want me to take revenge for you?" The blond man shook his head violently. "No, but I swear he's cheating. He even used multiple stun items." Before he could continue, the thug suddenly slammed the table. "Then what the hell do you want from me, you idiot?" His voice boomed through the room, making the surrounding clubgoers flinch. "I'm in the middle of business here, and you're wasting my time with your whining." The blond man gulped, but then he added, voice trembling, "But Yoon Dae-kyung seems to like him a lot." That got the thug's attention. His lips curled into a smirk. "Oh, so you do want revenge after all?" Meanwhile, not far from the booth, a blonde-haired woman leaned in close to a man with an eye patch, whispering seductively into his ear. "You're not close to that guy, are you? He looks like a total loser." "Ha ha ha ha, Tilda," the one-eyed man chuckled, then straightened up. He wanted to impress the woman, so without hesitation he called out, "Hey!" The blond man turned toward him, but before he could even react, schlick! A cold flash of steel, then pain. His left ear hit the table with a wet thud. Blood spurted from the side of his head as he screamed, clutching his wound, his entire body convulsing in agony. But the one-eyed man simply smiled. "Who do you think we are, huh?" He leaned down, lightly slapping the blond man's tear-streaked face. Then, in a voice as cold as ice, "You thought we were your personal errand boys?" The blond man trembled, his eyes wide with fear. The one-eyed man sneered. "Then you better pay the price." He grabbed a glass of alcohol from the table and poured it over the fresh bleeding wound. The blond man howled in pure agony, writhing as the liquor burned through his exposed flesh. But the one-eyed man just laughed, thoroughly enjoying the sight. Then, with a casual tilt of his head, he asked, "Now, tell me, where the hell is this bastard you're talking about?"